What if disappearing wasn't enough? You thought silence was your weapon. You believed ignoring her would make her miss you. But what if that strategy only made her more certain you were still waiting? There's a level beyond no contact, and she won't see it coming. It's not about blocking, deleting, or posting cryptic quotes. It's about becoming so unshakably indifferent that your existence no longer orbits her at all. And that's when her world starts to crack. Because real power isn't in her regret, it's in your evolution. You don't want her back, you want yourself back. And this time, you become someone she can never reach again, because you've outgrown everything she ever knew. What if you discovered a strategy so powerful that the typical no contact rule looks feeble by comparison? A tactic so emotionally devastating that the person who left you is left questioning everything, wondering how they ever let you go. Imagine turning your heartbreak into a force so strong that by the time they realize what they've lost, you won't even care. Picture the shock in their eyes when they see you rising from the ashes, stronger and more untouchable than ever. He was shattered and left in the dark, a man broken by love, but instead of staying broken, he transformed his pain into power. This isn't about playing games or waiting by the phone, it's about becoming the one thing they never saw coming, truly untouchable. The fall. A man broken by love. He never saw it coming. One moment she was his world. The late-night conversations, the inside jokes, the deep talks that made him believe they had something real, something unbreakable. And then, just like that, she was gone. No long explanation, no apology, just a cold, detached goodbye that hit him like a blade to the chest. In that instant, he felt the ground crumble beneath him, his heart lurched, and a dull numbness spread through his body. He stood there staring at his phone, rereading her last message as if looking hard enough would make it all make sense. But it didn't. It never does. The days that followed were pure torture. He wandered through them in a daze, nights blending into mornings without sleep. Each hour dragging on, every room felt empty. Every song reminded him of her. The bed felt too big without her warmth beside him. His phone was too quiet. The silence deafening. He would lie awake at 3 a.m., eyes burning and chest aching, still hearing her laugh in his head. He could picture the way she used to look at him like he was the only man in the world. But now she looked at him like a stranger, worse, like he didn't exist at all. That was the part that burned most. How easily she moved on. How quickly she erased him as if he had been just another phase. Another name she'd forget in a few months. Meanwhile, he was left with the ghosts of what used to be, unable to just turn off his feelings as she did. His mind became a battlefield, torn between rage and heartbreak, between wanting to hate her and wanting her back. Each morning was a new war between anger and longing. He replayed every moment, every conversation, searching for the mistake, for the exact moment when it all went wrong. Had he been too available? Too loving? Or not enough of something she needed? He scrutinized every detail in agonizing detail, punishing himself with guilt and doubt. He lost count of the nights he spent staring at the ceiling, losing sleep over a past he could never change. Some nights he'd wake up reaching for her, only to find the cold side of the bed and his heart breaking all over again. Friends and family noticed his hollow stare and forced smiles. That's when the advice started pouring in. Go number contact. They told him. Disappear. Make her miss you. At first, it sounded like a lifeline. He latched onto the idea with desperate hope, convincing himself that silence would be his weapon. And so he did it. He deleted her number, stopped checking her social media, and forced himself not to reach out. Every time his trembling fingers hovered over the keyboard, aching to send one last message, he stopped himself. He told himself he was being strong, that this was the way to make her realize what she lost. But deep down, he was still a prisoner. Even though he wasn't talking to her, he was thinking about her every single day. He woke up every morning wondering if she'd had a change of heart. He checked his phone constantly, hoping for a message that never came. He scrolled through old photos in the dead of night, staring at happier times and wondering if she had ever truly cared or if it was all just a lie. He told himself he was moving on, but in reality he was just waiting for her to come back. Waiting for that miraculous day when she'd wake up and realize she made a mistake. But that day never came, and with each silent day that passed, a harsh truth sank in. No contact wasn't enough. It was a bandage, not a cure, a temporary silence that did nothing to heal the wound inside him. Because as long as his happiness depended on her return, as long as he needed her validation to feel whole, he was still weak, and weakness is never attractive. She didn't respect him when he was broken, and she certainly wouldn't respect him for sitting around, hoping for a reunion. He finally understood. He was playing a game he'd already lost. And that realization hit him harder than ever. Something had to change, and it had to change within him. That's when everything changed. The truth about no contact. Why it's not enough. No contact. It's the advice everyone gives. The go-to strategy when you've been dumped, ghosted, or replaced. Just ignore her, they say. She'll come back when she realizes what she lost. And at first, it sounds like the perfect plan. A kind of silent war. You cut her off, you disappear, and you wait. You imagine the day she regrets it, the moment she checks her phone, sees you're gone, and suddenly panics. In your mind, she's missing you, stalking your social media, feeling the same emptiness you feel. It feels reassuring to think that with enough patience, she'll feel the loss just as deeply as you do. But here's the brutal truth. Most of the time, she doesn't, at least not in the way you expect. No contact can work, but only if you truly move on. The problem is, most men don't. They use no contact as a tactic, not a transformation. They're not actually healing, they're just waiting in the shadows, hoping. Day after day goes by and they're still tied to her. Their heart stuck on pause, waiting for that text, that phone call, that sign that she's finally realized her mistake. But waiting is just another form of weakness. Because as long as you're hoping for her return, she still owns you. Women can sense this kind of lingering attachment like a shark senses blood in the water. They can tell when a man is merely pretending to be strong, playing the role of someone who's moved on, rather than actually doing it. Silence alone doesn't fool anyone if behind it you're still a mess. If she's the center of your universe even in her absence, she'll feel it, and that knowledge gives her power. Why would she miss you when she knows, deep down, you're still there waiting for her? If she senses that you're still watching, still hoping, still emotionally at her mercy, then in her mind she hasn't truly lost you at all. So what happens then? She doesn't miss you, she simply moves on. Maybe, out of curiosity or ego. She checks in after a few weeks just to see if you're still there. Perhaps she sends a casual, "Hey, how've you been?" or likes a photo of yours just to get that small hit of validation. And when she sees that you respond, that you're still eager and available, it only confirms what she already believes. You were just a game she had already won. And with that little victory, she walks away again, feeling even more confident in her decision to leave. That's when most men break. That tiny bit of attention, a late-night text or a brief call, lights up their hope like a flash of lightning. They think, this is it, she's coming back. In their excitement, they make the fatal mistake. They show their cards. They respond in seconds, their messages overflowing with enthusiasm. They jump at the opportunity to interact, exposing the fact that they were never truly detached. In that moment, she realizes she was right to leave him waiting. The mystery is gone, and so is any respect she might have had for him. If no contact by itself isn't enough, then what is the answer? It isn't more silence or some new mind game. It's becoming a man she can never reach again. Not just temporarily ignoring her, but genuinely moving forward to the point where her actions no longer affect you. In a word, indifference. Absolute, unshakable indifference. The truth is, she will only feel the loss when she sees that you are no longer affected by her at all. Not pretending, not faking it, but actually gone from her reach. And when she does finally reach out, because eventually, curiosity or regret will push her to, she'll find that you simply don't care anymore. The power of indifference, beyond no contact. At first, he truly believed that no contact was the answer. If he just stayed silent long enough, he thought, she'd start to miss him. He figured she'd reach out once she realized what she lost. But as time dragged on, a brutal realization hit him. No contact wasn't changing anything. At least not inside him. Deep down, he was still waiting, still hoping, still letting her live rent-free in his mind. And as long as he still cared, as long as every quiet day was secretly about her, he was still weak. That was unacceptable. One night, he looked in the mirror and made a decision. No more waiting. No more hoping. No more pretending. It was time for something stronger than silence. Something she would never see coming. That something was indifference. Not just ignoring her messages or avoiding her in public. Truly erasing her from his world. He didn't just cut contact, he cut her out of his life entirely. She would no longer exist in his day-to-day thoughts. He purged the reminders of her. No more checking her social media under the guise of just curious. No wondering who she was with now. No leaving the door cracked open just in case she decided to come back. He hardened his heart to her memory. Her thoughts, her feelings, her regrets, none of it mattered anymore. She had made her choice and now, in his mind, she was truly gone. Here's the thing. No contact is just silence. But indifference is power. Silence can still carry an emotional charge. It can still mean you're fighting the urge to speak. But genuine indifference? That's the absence of urge entirely. That's what makes people panic. It's human nature to take silence as anger or hurt. But indifference? Indifference is emptiness. A void where love or hate used to be. When someone who once adored you now regards you as just another stranger, someone they could pass on the street without a second thought, that's when the weight of loss truly hits. And that's exactly what happened in his case. At first, she didn't notice the change. She likely assumed he was playing the same game as many others, suffering in silence. Waiting for her return, she felt secure thinking he was still there, in the background, pining for her. But then something shifted. His absence wasn't a tactic, it became his reality. His energy changed. He wasn't just avoiding contact with her, he was evolving beyond her. One day, out of the blue, she decided to check his social media, expecting to find the same man she left behind. Maybe she thought she'd see a hint of sadness or a cryptic post aimed at her. Instead, she found someone unrecognizable. The man on her screen was living his life to the fullest. Thriving and unbothered, he wasn't sulking in the dark or posting melancholy quotes. He looked better than ever, healthier, more confident, genuinely happy. It was as if he had been reborn from the heartbreak, forged into a stronger version of himself. Most jarring of all, she realized she was no longer a part of his story at all. That's when the seeds of regret began to sprout in her mind. She caught herself thinking, why isn't he broken? Why isn't he trying to get me back? Did I underestimate him? Did I make a mistake? Suddenly, she wasn't so sure of herself anymore. The narrative she'd been telling herself, that he'd be lost without her, was falling apart. Because if a man can move on without hesitation, if he can completely detach and improve himself, it forces you to question your own worth in his eyes. She had always assumed he would be there, quietly waiting in the wings, ready to take her back at a moment's notice. She thought she could return whenever she wanted and he'd welcome her with open arms. But now she wasn't so sure. For the first time, she felt a flicker of something she never expected, the fear that she might have lost him for good. And that's the secret. Indifference is so much stronger than silence. It's stronger than mere absence because people don't crave what they can ignore, they crave what they can't have. We desire the unreachable. When you reach this level of detachment, you don't need to block anyone or make grand announcements about moving on. You simply become someone they can never reach again. He had achieved exactly that. By the time she realized what she lost, he genuinely didn't care anymore. The dark side of attraction. Why they always come back. She thought she had won the day she walked away. In her mind, she held all the power. She assumed he'd crumble without her, that he'd drown himself in regret and be waiting on the sidelines for the day she got bored and decided to revisit the past. After all, that's what she had seen so many times before. Most men, when left, will beg, plead, or linger in the background, hoping for another chance. She expected him to do the same, maybe not right away. But eventually, she figured he would always be an option she could come back to if she ever felt the urge. But he did something she never anticipated. He vanished. Not just from her life, but seemingly from her very mind. It was as if he dropped off the face of the earth. No late-night texts, no accidental run-ins, no passive-aggressive social media posts. He disappeared in every sense. At first, she barely noticed his absence. She was too busy enjoying her newfound freedom, chasing new experiences, maybe even entertaining the attention of other men. In her story, He was still cast in the role of the heartbroken ex, silently suffering off stage. Yet as time passed, something felt off. Where was he? Why wasn't he watching her Instagram stories or liking her posts? Why wasn't he trying to win her back like every other guy before him? The usual signs of a man in silent agony were nowhere to be found. That's when a small seed of panic planted itself in her chest. Human nature is predictable in this way. We don't value what comes easy. We value what we fear might be gone forever. When she realized he wasn't just being quiet, he had moved on completely, it triggered something deep and primal inside her. Doubt, uncertainty, curiosity. The same man who once adored her, who would have moved mountains for her, had now become a mystery. And nothing is more attractive, in a dark and twisted way, than a man who is suddenly untouchable. This is the dark side of attraction. People are often drawn to what they cannot control. We crave what is scarce. The moment you remove yourself from someone's reach, you create a void they can't ignore. And so, predictably, the game shifted. She found herself checking his social media more often, searching for any hint that he still cared. Maybe she would throw out a small test, a like on an old photo, a casual, "hope you're doing well" text, or a trivial question as if nothing had happened between them. It wasn't a heartfelt attempt to reconcile, it was a probe. A way to see if she still had an effect on him. If he responded with the eagerness she expected, she'd get that ego boost knowing he was still under her thumb. If he ignored her completely, well, that thought unsettled her more than she cared to admit. This right here is where most men fail. The moment she tosses out some attention, they leap at it like a starving man given a scrap of food. They mistake her mild curiosity for genuine regret. They think, this is it, she's realizing what she lost. And in that hopeful delusion, they rush back in. The instant they do, showing even a crack of longing or enthusiasm, she wins and loses interest all over again. The cycle repeats, heartbreak reloaded on her terms. But not him, not this time. He finally understood the game and refused to play. He remembered the pain of being at her mercy and had no intention of giving her that power ever again. He had become something more in her absence, the prize. He no longer needed to prove his worth to her, he carried it within himself. So when she finally did reach out, expecting to find the same lovesick man she left behind, she encountered someone entirely different. He was polite, perhaps, but distant, colder. A version of him that viewed her not as the center of his world, but as a lesson from a chapter he'd already closed. To him, she was a memory, one he could revisit without pain, but also without longing. And that's when the regret hit her in full force. Not because she suddenly loved him again or because losing him was devastating, but because she finally understood that he had slipped out of her grasp. He no longer cared. The power dynamic had flipped. She was the one looking back in regret, and he was already long gone. The Stoic transformation, turning pain into power. The man she left in pieces was not the man he intended to remain. Instead of letting the pain destroy him, he chose to let it remake him. This was the beginning of a Stoic transformation, a turning of pain into power. The old him might have chased after her shadow endlessly, but that version of him was gone. Left in his place was a man determined to rebuild himself from the ground up. Pain can be a prison or a forge, and he decided it would forge him. In the depths of his heartbreak, he found a strange clarity. Instead of running from the pain, he faced it head on. He allowed himself to feel every ounce of it, the loneliness, the anger, the grief. Then he started to shape it. Each tear, each sleepless night, became fuel for something new. He picked up books on philosophy, especially Stoicism, learning how warriors and emperors of old dealt with hardship. He read about controlling one's emotions, focusing only on what can be controlled, and accepting reality without resistance. Gradually, he turned his agony into motivation. If he couldn't change the past, he would reshape his future. He began with his mind. Emotional control became his foundation. He practiced calming his reactions, meditating on patience and resilience. Whenever thoughts of her threatened to break his resolve, he observed them and let them pass. Like dark clouds drifting across the sky, he trained himself to respond to life with calm and reason rather than panic and despair. Day by day, he could feel himself growing more centered. The storms inside him were dying down. Next came his body, because a warrior's mind is best housed in a warrior's body. Every bit of energy he used to waste on heartbreak, he redirected into self-discipline. The gym became his proving ground. Each weight he lifted, each mile he ran, each drop of sweat was a silent promise to himself. I will never be this weak again. When he felt like quitting, he remembered the image of her walking away and it fueled him to push harder. Over weeks and months, his physique began to change. He grew stronger, faster, more resilient. His shoulders squared up, his head held higher. Even his posture when he walked into a room signaled a new confidence. People who once pitied him now looked at him with respect, even admiration. But the transformation wasn't just physical or intellectual, it was in his very presence. He no longer sought validation from anyone. He no longer needed an encouraging text or a pat on the back to feel worthy. By needing nothing, he began to attract everything. Confidence has a gravity, and he had it now. The same acquaintances who had overlooked him in the past suddenly found him interesting. Strangers could sense something different about him, a quiet strength that didn't need to shout to be noticed. And yes, somewhere out there, she noticed too, perhaps through mutual friends or those inevitable glimpses of social media. She saw the man he was becoming. The man she thought was replaceable had leveled up far beyond what she expected. While she was busy looking elsewhere, he was climbing, rising, transforming. He was turning into the kind of man that turns heads when he enters a room. Strong in body, sharp in mind, unbothered in spirit, the very qualities she always claimed to want. He now embodied, and he did it all without her. This is the essence of turning pain into power, not seeking revenge, not staging grand gestures to make her jealous, but becoming so undeniably valuable and fulfilled that the past becomes irrelevant. He didn't just get over her. He rose so far above the old situation that she became a mere footnote in his story. Because in the end, the ultimate victory isn't about making an ex regret leaving. It's about becoming someone so strong, so complete, that the idea of them coming back is no longer even of interest. He became someone she could never have again, and that was worth more than any revenge. Silent domination. Winning without words. The old him might have felt the need to broadcast his comeback to the world, to post cryptic quotes about rising stronger, to flaunt his new lifestyle in the hopes that she'd notice. He might have tried to win the breakup by showing off or making a scene. But the man he had become had nothing to prove. His success and growth spoke for themselves. This was the art of silent domination. No words, no boasting, no dramatic announcements, just results. While others in his situation wasted energy trying to make their exes notice them, he focused singularly on elevating his own life. He understood a simple, powerful truth. The most dangerous man in the room is the one who says the least and accomplishes the most. So he didn't block her out of spite. In fact, he didn't bother to touch any part of their past at all. He didn't delete old photos in a fit of anger or post pointed song lyrics hoping she'd see. He simply removed his emotional energy from her entirely. In his story, she went from a main character to someone who barely warranted a footnote. And that is what disturbed her most. Not just his absence, but the eerie sense that it was as if she had never been there in the first place. He gave her no dramatic goodbyes, no fiery exchanges, no closure to cling to, just silence and a life that moved on without her. In the beginning, she brushed it off, telling herself, "He's just pretending. He's doing this to get under my skin." She expected to find cracks in his facade, little hints that he was still hurting and just trying to save face. But as weeks turned into months, something unexpected happened. No cracks appeared. His silence wasn't an act, it was real. She started to wonder with genuine concern. Why isn't he watching my stories? Why doesn't he react to anything I do? Did I misjudge how much he cared? She had anticipated bitterness, maybe even some resentment-fueled drama from him. She got nothing of the sort. Just indifference. Just quiet, unshakable indifference. And that silence forced her to do something she hadn't done before, reflect. With nothing but a void from his side, her mind began to wander back to the times he had been there. She started remembering things she had once taken for granted, the way he used to support her dreams. The small, thoughtful gestures he made. How he was always there when she needed someone. Memories she had pushed aside now bubbled up uninvited. Curiosity got the better of her. She found herself casually bringing up his name when talking to mutual friends. Fishing for any news about him. She scrolled further back on his social media than she ever had. Looking for signs, any sign, that he might still miss her or that he was anything less than perfectly fine. But what she found unsettled her more. Photo after photo, update after update. He wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. He looked good, truly happy. There were pictures of him out with friends, maybe pursuing new hobbies or traveling, smiling in a way that was real and unforced. There were no hidden cries for attention, no veiled messages directed at her. He was simply living his life, and doing it well. That's when regret began to creep in for her. It dawned on her that while she was off distracting herself with fleeting fun and superficial validation, he was quietly becoming the man she'd always hoped he could be. Only now she no longer had any part in his life. The realization hit hard. He had been transforming into the best version of himself. And she had absolutely nothing to do with it. Winning without words turned out to be the most powerful victory of all. He never had to argue or convince her that he had changed. His entire aura made it obvious. His energy spoke louder than any words could. By the time she might have considered reaching out to the man she once knew, that man was gone. In his place was someone who had outgrown the past completely. When, out of a mix of curiosity and remorse, she finally reached out to get a glimpse of his life, she was met with polite distance. It became crystal clear that he didn't need to explain his growth to her or to anyone. The ultimate power move was this: he let his actions, his life, and his success do all the talking. In the end, he made her realize that she had never been a factor in his success at all. His achievements were his own. His happiness was self-created. And as she pieced together this truth, she understood that she had lost him long before she even thought about coming back. The social shift, creating an aura of mystery. In the beginning of his transformation, he considered cutting himself off from the digital world entirely, deleting social media, vanishing without a trace. He thought if he disappeared completely, she'd be left forever wondering. But then he realized something more subtle and perhaps more powerful: mystery. Completely vanishing would have been too straightforward. She'd simply assume he was bitter or too hurt to cope. No, there was a better strategy: remain present, but become unreadable. So he didn't block her, and he didn't go on a loud attention-seeking spree either. Instead, he adopted an air of quiet unpredictability. Where before he had been an open book, now he was a captivating puzzle with a few pieces artfully missing. No sad quotes, no pointed messages, no obvious bids for attention. He began to share just enough to suggest he was doing well, maybe a photo of him laughing at a gathering with friends, or a snapshot of a new hobby or adventure, but he provided zero context. A smiling picture of him at a scenic overlook with a simple caption like, "Grateful," and nothing more. A check-in at a concert of a band he'd never mentioned liking. These were just glimpses, little breadcrumbs of a life that seemed fuller and happier than before. Yet they revealed almost nothing concrete. And it drove her quietly crazy. Because a man who is present but unreadable is far more intriguing than one who is simply gone. When she saw these small windows into his new life, her mind raced to fill in the blanks. Is he seeing someone else? She wondered. How is he out there having fun? Was he always this strong, this interesting, and I just never noticed? The more she tried to figure him out, the more frustrated she became. She had expected him to be nursing a broken heart, maybe posting the occasional melancholic song lyric or disappearing entirely. Instead, here he was, visible yet unknowable. People don't obsess over what they understand, they obsess over what confuses them. And now, he was the ultimate mystery. The version of him she thought she knew had melted away, and in his place stood someone new and enigmatic. Every time she checked his profile, looking for any clue that might reveal his true feelings, she came up empty. He was careful and intentional with what he shared. Every post exuded confidence and forward momentum. But none of them said, "Look at me, I'm better without you." He simply was better, and he didn't need to say it at all. The unpredictability of his actions kept him in her thoughts more than a direct confrontation ever could. This was the social shift, a rebalancing of power in the shadows of social media and mutual connections. He had become a presence she couldn't ignore and yet couldn't decipher. And as much as it kept her guessing, he wasn't doing it as a trick to lure her back. Not at all. He embraced this aura of mystery because it was a natural byproduct of his growth. He had outgrown the need to explain himself or update anyone, especially her, on his every move. His life was his own, and she no longer had a window into it unless he left it open a crack. And that, he did purely on his own terms. In the end, this strategy was never actually about her, it was about him. He became a mystery because he was exploring new parts of life that she had no share in. And ironically, that made her regret letting him go even more. She finally saw what she had missed. A man capable of change, of depth, of independence. A man who could evolve beyond the confines of who she thought he was. By the time she realized the full extent of his transformation, it was far too late. He had moved on to a world where she was simply not included. And that realization left her with a bitter taste of regret. The ultimate test. When she reaches out. Eventually, the moment arrived. She reached out. It might have been a simple, "Hey, how have you been?" that lit up his phone screen. Or a comment on something he posted. Or perhaps she dredged up an old memory in a message like, "Remember that restaurant we loved? I went there today and thought of you." However it happened, it was not an accident. It was a calculated dip of her toe back into his waters to test the temperature. Most men, when faced with this situation, feel their hearts jump into their throat. The rush of seeing her name pop up can be overwhelming. All the memories and dormant hopes surge forward. In that haze of emotion, they often crumble. They convince themselves, "This is my chance." She finally realized what she lost. And before they can think, they're typing back a novel. Or eagerly agreeing to meet. Essentially undoing all the progress they'd made. He'd been that man before. But not now. When her message came through, he paused. His heart didn't race, in fact. He was surprised at how calm he felt. He had spent too much time rebuilding himself to let one little, "hey," unravel him. He looked at the message and understood exactly what it was. A probe to see if he was still an option. She was checking if the door was still open, even a crack. And he had no intention of giving her what she wanted. So he didn't take the bait. He refused to be a pawn in that game again. This wasn't out of spite or a desire to punish her. It was simply that she was no longer a central figure in his life. He owed her nothing, not even a response. Perhaps he chose not to respond at all, letting the message sit there marked as "read," without a reply. Or maybe he did respond, but kept it so brief and impersonal that it effectively closed the conversation immediately. Something like a polite, "Hi, I'm good, hope you're well." No questions, no emoticons. No indication of lingering feelings. That, more than anything else, is what shook her. She expected some kind of reaction, maybe excitement, maybe anger, maybe a flood of pent-up words. At the very least, she expected to feel that she still had some effect on him. Instead, she was met with a wall of indifference. If he ignored her, the silence would have been deafening. If he gave a curt one-liner, it was almost worse. It was him acknowledging her presence as casually as if she were an old acquaintance he barely remembered. After all the history they shared, To be treated with such cool detachment was jarring. For the first time ever, she felt a sting of the very rejection she once dealt him. Now she was the one staring at a phone, waiting for a reply that never came or rereading a single lukewarm message trying to decipher its tone. Her mind went into overdrive. Does he not think about me at all anymore? Has he found someone else? Did I really mean so little to him now? She had thought she held all the cards. But when she played one, it turned out he wasn't even at the table anymore. In that power reversal, she experienced a flood of emotions she didn't anticipate: confusion, regret, and an uncomfortable emptiness where her pride used to be. The more she tried to get some reaction from him, the more powerless she felt. If she sent another message, he either didn't reply or answered hours or days later with a courteous yet distant tone. No anger, no warmth, nothing for her to grab onto. It was like trying to hold smoke. This was the ultimate test of everything he had become, and he passed with flying colors. A man who can maintain his composure and self-respect when the person who broke his heart comes casually knocking. He is a man who will never be broken again. By not giving in to the allure of that moment, he proved to himself that he was truly over it. Once you've mastered yourself to that degree, once you've outgrown the need for an ex's validation, you realize a liberating truth. The past has nothing left to offer you. From that point on, there was no going back for him. He had slammed the door on that chapter and was already walking toward a better future. And as for her, she was left to face the consequences of her choices, standing alone on the other side of a door that would never open for her again. The final shift, becoming truly unbreakable. There comes a moment in every true journey of healing when you wake up and realize you're free. For him, that moment wasn't when she finally reached out, nor was it when he detected her regret. It was when, for the first time, he noticed that she simply didn't matter to him anymore. He was surprised to find that her name, if mentioned in passing, provoked no rush of feelings. It was just a name. Her memory had become just that, a memory, with no sting attached. He didn't arrive at this place out of nowhere, it crept in gradually. Maybe one afternoon he was going about his day and suddenly noticed that he hadn't thought about her in weeks. Or maybe he came across something that used to remind him of her, like a song or a place, and felt nothing more than a distant familiarity, as if it belonged to another life. That was the final shift, realizing that the breakup no longer defined him, that his wounds had turned to scars and even those scars were fading. In that shift, he felt truly unbreakable, not in an arrogant, boastful way. There was no, "Look at me, I'm invincible," fanfare. It was quiet, like the strength of an oak tree that had weathered storm after storm. He understood now that he had nothing left to prove, neither to her nor to himself. The pain that once burdened him was now just a lesson he carried without effort. He didn't need to check her social media. He didn't wonder whether she regretted her choices. Whether she thought about him or not was none of his concern. He was genuinely too busy living his life, chasing his own dreams, and enjoying the freedom of emotional independence. This is what truly broke her in the end, not his silence, not his absence, but his genuine indifference. The realization on her part that she no longer had any influence over him whatsoever. She had always assumed that deep down, she'd always mean something to him, that she could always come back and find a piece of his heart still waiting. She believed the door would always be a little open, but the day she looked back and found that door not just closed, but gone, she felt a shock of loss unlike any before. The man she once knew was so far beyond her reach that in his world, she was irrelevant. Many people stumble on this step. They think moving on is about replacement, finding someone new to fill the void, or about proving a point to the one who hurt them. They chase shallow victories like making an ex jealous or desperately seeking validation in someone else's arms. But he realized true power isn't found in any of that. True power is when you no longer need validation at all. It's when your self-worth isn't tethered to another's presence or absence. He didn't forge ahead to make her jealous. He didn't grind and grow just to rub it in her face. He became unbreakable because that was the natural evolution of reclaiming his life. It was who he was meant to be all along. Once the dead weight of a toxic attachment was gone, when he reached this stage, something incredible happened. The past truly lost all power over him. He no longer looked back with what-ifs or what could have beens. Because there was nothing back there that interested him anymore. He finally understood that everything he needed was ahead of him, or within him, never behind. Real strength looked nothing like he once imagined. It wasn't about flaunting new relationships or showing off success to provoke envy. It was in the simple fact of existing as a self-assured man, commanding respect without having to demand it. He had become the kind of person whose presence is felt whenever he walks into a room, not because he's trying to be seen, but because he's quietly confident and self-possessed. No longer was he a victim of heartbreak. He had become a force of nature, resilient, steady, and forward-moving. He had risen from the ashes of his old self stronger than ever. And the most profound realization in all of this was that the story was never really about her. It was about him. It always had been. She was a chapter. An important one, yes, but just a chapter. And now that chapter was closed, filed away in the library of his past. He didn't need to tear it out or burn it. It simply no longer had any hold on him. In that final shift, he found something even more valuable than getting her back. He found himself. The new reality. A life on his terms. This was it. The new reality he had fought so hard to reach. A life completely on his own terms. In this reality, he woke up in the morning with purpose and peace, not with a weight on his chest. His days were no longer tinted by the shadows of heartbreak or the yearning for someone to validate him. He shaped his life based on his own desires and goals, free from the ghost of her memory. He was no longer haunted by the past. Those old wounds had healed into wisdom. He wasn't waiting for anyone to realize his worth. He knew his worth perfectly well. The question of what could have been never crossed his mind anymore. Because he was too engaged in the possibilities of what could be in his own future. He didn't care who she was with, or what she was doing. He didn't care if she ever regretted her decision. That was her burden to bear. He didn't even care if she occasionally lurked on his profile out of curiosity. The man she once knew, the one who would have cared, who would have obsessed over whether she was watching, no longer existed. In his place stood someone greater. He was a man who had built himself from the ground up, brick by brick, day by day. A man who had mastered his emotions after weathering the worst storm of his life. He had sharpened his mind through reflection and learning, and hardened his spirit through resilience and perseverance. He walked into every room with a quiet confidence, knowing he needed nothing from anyone in it. The validation he once craved? Irrelevant now. The attention he thought he needed? Meaningless. He didn't need to boast or show off. He didn't even need to be seen. His presence was felt naturally by the way he carried himself. This was the part she never saw coming. In the back of her mind, she always figured that if she ever wanted to, she could turn around and he'd be there. Maybe not right away, but eventually. She assumed she'd always occupy a small, safe corner of his heart. But when she finally did look back, hoping to find him where she left him, he was nowhere to be found. Not in a literal sense. He hadn't moved cities or gone into hiding, but in the ways that truly mattered. He was gone. The door she thought would always be ajar was now sealed shut, as if it had never existed. And that is the true power move. No grand revenge. No bitterness. Just growth. He didn't block her out of spite. He outgrew her out of necessity. He didn't look back at her because he finally understood the past held nothing new for him. He realized he didn't need any final conversation or closure from her side. His life itself became the closure. Every achievement, every peaceful night of sleep, every genuine smile he found again was like another nail in the coffin of that old relationship. It wasn't a bitter burial, just a natural end to something that no longer served him. And that is what really broke her when she came to terms with it. Not that he had moved on. Not even that he was doing better, though that stung her pride. What truly devastated her was the revelation that she no longer existed in his world in any meaningful way. She had become nothing more than a lesson to him, one that he had learned and moved on from. While she was still, at times, stuck in the past, rereading old messages or wondering what if. He was out there thriving in a reality she would never again be a part of. In the end, the strongest man isn't the one who schemes to get his ex back. It's the one who becomes so strong that he never needs to. He had become that man, so powerful in himself that the idea of going back was not only unnecessary. It didn't even cross his mind. His happiness, his success, his future, none of it depended on her or anyone else. He was the master of his own destiny now. His journey that began with heartbreak had led to an unexpected and far more meaningful destination: self-mastery and genuine freedom. This chapter of his life closed not with a teary reunion or a dramatic confrontation, but with a confident stride forward into a new life. The saga with her had ended, but for him, a whole new story was beginning, one where he was the sole author and hero. The lesson for anyone watching? The moment you stop chasing someone who left, the moment you stop waiting for external validation, is the moment you step fully into your own power. It was never about making someone else regret their choice. It was about making yourself so fulfilled and strong that their choice no longer matters. He realized that, and once he did, he truly became unstoppable. In the end, this was never about getting her back. It was about getting yourself back. About rising from the ashes of heartbreak not as the same man, but as a stronger, wiser, more grounded version of who you were always meant to become. The kind of man who no longer begs for attention, because he walks in purpose. Who no longer seeks closure, because he's found peace within. And the most powerful shift of all? When you no longer look back, because everything worth living for is now ahead of you. If this story spoke to something deep inside you, if you felt the pain, the power, and the turning point, then you're not alone, you're on the path too. Right finger subscribe for more powerful lessons on strength, self-mastery, and silent victories. Right finger follow the journey because every week, we build stronger men from broken moments. Your healing is not behind you. It begins right here.